I'd like to call the November 19th meeting of the Village of Cold Spring Planning Board to order. Linda, it is 7:02. You ready to go?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm a full house this evening. For those of you who are not normally with us, we follow a fairly defined agenda here. We open with chairman's remarks, minutes, reports of staff, correspondence, any unfinished business, any new business, any public comment, and then adjournment. Traditionally, what we do is I try and dispense with the chairman's remarks, which I will do this evening. I don't have any remarks per se. Item number 2, the approval of minutes, and I believe we only received our minutes in draft form yesterday. So we need to circulate those to the board members, so you'll be receiving the hard copies and electronic versions tomorrow, and we'll try and get those posted as quickly as possible. They are not extensive, but through a technical glitch, like I said, Ann only received them last night. So if you could look them over so we can get them posted as quickly as possible within the next day or so, that would be helpful. That being the case, our next area is reports of staff and special committees. We don't have anything to really report on other than, so we're gonna go directly to correspondence. We have 3 items of correspondence. This was forwarded electronically. We have a referral from the Village Board of Trustees regarding Resolution 30-214, which is a change in the village's building permit scenario. Essentially, basically what it is to bring everything into conformance. The village building permits will go to a 2-year period of time. This is essentially a notification to us for a referral if we have any comment. The public hearing has already been scheduled. You see the notice is on one side, and the actual proposed change in the local law in Chapter 40, which is the building code, is on the reverse side. It is pretty pro forma. It is nothing that requires us to opine on or comment, but that being the case, if members of the planning board do have comments, I would suggest that you direct them to Mayor Falloon, who's indicated if we do have any comments, we should apprise him of that, and then he'll refer them to the village board. The second area of correspondence we have, which I believe I forwarded you the link, we have December 5th is the PACE Land Use Law Center Annual Training Conference, of which several of us regularly attend. Here is a description of this year's conference as well as the agenda topics that will be discussed. It is a week from next Friday. I would suggest if anyone is interested in doing so, they go online and register, and then we can work out in terms of the CLE credit or reimbursement schedule or any type of group rate that we can get depending on who is interested in attending the conference. So I would heartily recommend that. We go every year, and like I said, it will qualify for CLE credit for our 4-hour annual requirement.
If you're
Yes.
gonna negotiate whatever rates or group or anything, you need us to tell you if we wish to go.
Well, ideally, that would be the case. I'll follow it up with an email because I'm not sure what number of bodies we would need to generate in order to qualify for the group discount. So figured we'd find out who wants to go first, and then I'll see what I can do after the fact. The third item of business, which I sent an email correspondence to you today, is this is the copy which I understand the village clerk, Mary Sari, also forwarded to everyone this afternoon. This is a memorandum from the Historic District Review Board concerning some potential issues or concerns they may have with the building mass and scale of 2 of the proposed buildings for the Butterfield project. They're currently, as we know, meeting with Butterfield's architect, and they've had 2 meetings to date. They have requested a joint meeting with the planning board to discuss some of their concerns and issues regarding the placement and orientation of 2 of the proposed buildings. I suggested that they put their concerns in writing, which this memorandum reflects, and I have scheduled a joint meeting with them for our next planning board meeting, which would be Wednesday, December 3rd at 7 p.m. here. So when that agenda goes out in another few days or so, it will include the notice, and it will include a copy of the memorandum, which we just got. basically laying out their concerns, and part of our meeting will be a joint meeting with the HDRB to have a discussion as to their concerns relative to site plan and how we might need to proceed. All right, so look over the memorandum, think of any questions you may have or concerns, and we will be meeting for an in-depth discussion with the HDRB on the 12th. Chuck and Anna will be present for that as well, too.
Third.
Excuse me, the 12th.
Third.
The 12th month, the 3rd, Wednesday the 3rd. That being the case, we have, I guess, we're gonna go right into unfinished business, which is the continued review of site plan. You'll recall from our last meeting, we had tasked Chuck with completing a technical memo, which you all received, and you have copies of in front of you now. And there's some subsidiary information which everybody picked up in the last week or so, which addresses some of the information that was missing from the presentation at our last meeting. With that being the case, I'm gonna hand it over to Chuck now, and then I believe Anna has some conversation or discussion pertaining to site plan, or would you?
Yeah, all I'd like to say is that as we do proceed with these the review memo and review where things are in the process, I'd like to update the board at the next meeting on procedural aspects and the public hearing requirements for site plan and subdivision and how we proceed, so I plan to do that at the next.
Right, and is that something we can look for, even a brief outline or memo prior
Sure.
to the meeting,
Sure,
which will be December 3rd?
okay.
Okay, thank you. Chuck?
All right, as Barney mentioned, when we were here last time, we had just started to receive information from the applicant. If you remember, the kind of agreed upon due date for submission of the first full set of plans was October 27th. We did get, some preliminary site plans then, some additional information came in, but there were still some missing pieces, so that when we met with the board last time, we were expecting some additional information, which has subsequently come in. But unfortunately, what that did is that pushed our initial kind of 2-week review timeframe, out a little bit. So, in the meantime, what we've done since we were last here is looked over the additional information that had come in, and I'll go over that in a second, and formulated basically our first set of review comments. And you all got that 16-page, letter with lots of technical comments in it. If you remember, when we first started talking about site plan review, we envisioned probably several rounds of back and forth with the applicants and their engineers as the process evolved, as the site started to come in under design. Typically, this is the first crack at looking at their materials. And as we mentioned, they were pretty good last time. The applicants have worked very hard to kind of meet an aggressive timetable. There's a lot of information to look at, as you all know from your plan set. There's multiple pages of site plan sheets, there's multiple documents to look at. A site this size generates a lot of technical information, as we knew. This is something we talked about early on in the process, and something we fully expected. So, the expectation moving forward is that, we start to look at these things from a technical perspective. When we have our engineers, our water folks, our, sewer folks start to look at things, the environmental folks, our traffic folks. And we really start to dissect the actual plans themselves. The plans are really kind of putting form now to that whole concept that we've been looking at for over a year. So what we're doing now is gonna go through those details. Some of the details are just, real nitty-gritty stuff. Put this note on this sheet, missing this comment on this sheet, show the pipe size for this here. Some of that stuff, is hopefully you saw when you went through the letter, is routine stuff. We see it all the time with these types of projects. Some of the other issues, which might be a little bit larger, a little bit more, we want to focus on a little bit more, I'll bring those up again tonight. And we'll start to look at that. But as the plans evolve, you will see this level of detail, this level of questioning, hopefully get shorter and shorter and shorter. I would expect probably another round or two of revisions and resubmissions as the applicants move forward, as they address these issues. I will tell you, we have a very good and open line of communication with our engineer and their consultants, which is great. They're very open to discussing these things, and as a matter of fact, based on this letter, this 16-page comment letter, and any additional comments that come from tonight's meeting, We have a meeting scheduled with the applicants, consultants tomorrow, to start to filter through this so that they know clearly what we're asking for and they fully understand, what are some of the technical issues that we might be raising. Sometimes it's great just to give them a black and white letter, but we find it's much more effective if you can sit down with their engineers and show them on a set of plans, this is what we're thinking with this area. Here's our concern with not having this information here. Those types of kind of workouts we find are very, very productive. So that hopefully then they respond to this letter in a formal manner with their next submission. What we'll have them do is basically take a carbon copy of this letter and go through it and address every point for us so that we can see in their next submission, what they've addressed and how they've addressed it. And they'll have a new set of plans that come in. So expect more paper and more plans. That's how the site plan process really moves forward. It's a work in progress as we go. There's some give and take sometimes. We don't always know the best, management practice for certain things. Engineers are like attorneys. They can come up with a lot of different ways to do the same thing. There's a lot of new technologies out there that hopefully, we can employ as the project moves forward to really get a good design project. In the end, the goal is to make sure that the project functions properly, fits properly, and, behaves as it's designed to behave,
So just to be clear before you go into that, we can expect the next iteration and a detailed comment memo for our meeting on December 17th. We're not looking for something on the
Correct.
3rd, which is
Yeah.
only 2 weeks
The
out.
third would be too aggressive, I think.
Okay, I just want that
And I'll
understood.
confirm that when we have our meeting tomorrow with the consultants, I'll confirm, that they think they might be able to address it by the 17th. I think they can.
Okay.
Most of these comments are pretty straightforward. So we'll do that, but that would be the goal, is to have them resubmit before the 17th, so that we have, again, more time to look at their resubmission, see what they've addressed, see how they've addressed it, and then we can certainly advise this board on the 17th, and as to kind of where we are in that process. So that's kind of a quick, sense of, how we proceed with these types of things and really kind of where we're gonna go. And certainly stop me as I start to go through this, and I probably won't hit on every comment on every page, simply because some of it are just, minor comments. But if you have questions or thoughts, as you guys have looked at this stuff over the last, couple weeks, and looked at the plans, let me know if things pop up. Because we certainly want to add those, to our comments and our questions, for the applicants. So, I'll just kind of go over the cover page real quickly. As you can tell, we kind of outlined when things came in. The following items were submitted on October 27th, which was the site subdivision plan for the Butterfield project. That was kind of the first big plan set we got. Then 2 days later, on the 29th, we got the stormwater management plan. We got it, this is the SWIP, we call it a SWIP, but it's a stormwater pollution prevention plan. It's their management plan, it's how they intend to basically.
Which is what bound cop.
Exactly. How they intend to deal with their stormwater on site. We put it in a binder, we perforate it so that we can pull pages out. My engineers love to cut and paste it. As you can see, they've gone through this in some detail. And I started to dissect that. The benefit of having the management report alongside the plans is the plans physically show how they're gonna deal with their stormwater management systems. The report provides the technical backup, the calculations, the modeling, the design layouts, the type of facilities they're gonna use, the formats, the design. So, we have these two kind of documents to really kind of help offset and really kind of show us what that design's gonna look like. Additionally, on November 7th, what had come in a little bit later was the engineer's report. The engineer's report really looks at their water system and their sewer system and provides kind of the technical backup to that. We also got the erosion and sediment control plan, which had come in, how they're gonna deal with erosion issues and sediment control issues during construction and everything else. The stormwater plan came in digital form at that point. We also got, at the bottom of that, on November 10th, the test pit data. We'd asked for that. Basically, we wanted to kind of see and understand where the new test pit data had come in for water issues, for design issues. Peterson Engineering Group gave us their calculations, their site calculations, which were great. We got the updated engineer's report. The first one we got was a 3-page kind of summary, which really wasn't adequate. The actual report came in, which was 15 pages, which was much better, much more detailed. We got the test pit locations. It was unclear initially from the first submission where those test pits were located. And then we got a slightly revised erosion and sediment control plan. So basically what we're trying to say is over that span of about 3 weeks, 2 weeks, information had come in, which we were, originally hoping to get on the 27th of October.
I think, as you go through this, if there a question occurs to a member,
Yeah.
Barney, something with the
Yeah, I
test pit?
just,
Yeah.
the test pit locations are actually different than the preliminary pit locations. That's correct, right?
Yep.
Does the data from the new test pit locations, does it indicate any significant changes in the?
At this point, it doesn't, no. Our hydrogeologist looked at it, and it basically said, it pretty much mirrors what we saw the first time around in the EIS. So we're not seeing any kind of anomalies there. But what I would expect, and I don't know if we had the comment in here or not, probably not at this point. But we'll make sure that, in the next round, we'll make sure we point that out as well. We'll look at that. So, we kind of divided the letter into a couple different sections. There's general comments, which I'll go through quickly. Then we have some technical review comments, which is broken down into things like the water issues, the sewer issues, landscaping issues. We did get in their lighting plan, which was a plan sheet. I think everybody saw that. I haven't had a chance to have our engineer look at that plan yet. That'll be one of the things we'll probably provide at the next meeting. And I did get some additional transportation comments that I'll go over at the end of this.
Okay.
We'll just kind of fill in, so. But let's just go through this quickly, and I don't wanna spend, too much time, but, as you can tell, as you start to look, things like notes on plans. First one here is, under general construction notes, there's language discussing blasting. We needed to see some more detail on what those notes meant and what they're anticipating, potentially, if there were any blasting issues to look at.
But I have a question.
Yep.
I believe that we had a prior discussion on blasting, and I don't remember or recall what the resolution was, but I seem to recall that the village code does not allow blasting.
Right.
What was the resolution of that?
I don't remember anything.
I remember we discussed it,
Yeah.
but I can't remember what the resolution.
I think it needed a special permit from the village board if blasting were to occur, and then under that, there was a protocol that was gonna be established. The EIS talked about, establishing kind of very specific protocols if blasting were necessary. In general, these are general construction notes that you find in every set of site plans.
So are we indicating now that blasting will take place?
No, this is just a general note to say if blasting does occur on the site, here are the parameters, as to how it should happen.
Okay, but there hasn't been any incidents of rock incurred anywhere, right?
We haven't seen anything to indicate.
So the only possibility could be the demolition of the existing hospital, is that
Potentially.
correct?
Yeah, potentially.
Yeah,
We don't know.
we had spoke about inspections of surrounding foundations
Yeah,
prior to any blasting notifications,
yeah.
Mhm.
and that we're gonna have to do.
Yeah, the EIS set up a whole
Yeah, it's
blasting
in the
protocol.
demolition protocol, which
Right.
is something that,
That was part of it.
Yeah.
the building department spoke
Yep.
to.
So again, these were the general notes that you typically find on most sets of plans. And the reason we ask for these notes on plans is so that it's on the record. If the building department has to go out and enforce something, they pull the plan set out, the construction notes are right there. It's also important for the contractor who's going to be building this project, separate and apart from the engineers. The applicant's engineers aren't gonna be the ones building this project, they're gonna hire a contractor. You want your plan notes to be very specific for those contractors, so they fully understand what the limitations are on the site. So you'll see, as we start to evolve, you start to go through your plans, you'll see just, comment, note after note after note, that are relatively routine, but, they're essential to have on the plans, for those reasons. So, again, a general note. Note 8 talks about removal of demolition materials. Our question is, do they anticipate any, toxic materials or asbestos to be removed? If there is, let's put the notes on the sheets and, describe how they're gonna deal with it. So these will be all questions they're gonna have to address for us. What we'll do, and just so it kind of makes sense. We'll provide the applicant with a Word version of this letter, and what we encourage them to do is cut and paste every one of our comments and then address it directly underneath. So they basically give us our letter back with their comments noted underneath as to how they address those questions. It's a very effective way to kind of walk through and make sure that they've addressed everything we've asked and where they've addressed it and show us, so. The second part here, we have some general storm drainage and utility notes. This is an example, I'll read one. Revised note 2, as village engineer will not be approving location of existing utilities. Reference should be made to contacting Dig Safely New York on the plans for the stakeout of existing utilities, including those in the Route 9D right-of-way where connections are proposed. Again, kind of a standard note. You know, we put that on all the plans, but it's important to have it there. You know, you wanna make sure that their contractor stakes out, you know, those utilities so that there's no issues. Note 4, in note 4, there's reference to footing drains being discharged to daylight. Is that proposed, or will they all be conveyed to the storm drainage management system? I'll go on to read the comment. It's difficult to tell because the storm sewer structure inverts shown on sheet C302 do not include any inverts for roof drains or footing drains. We're basically asking, show us how you're gonna make those connections. It's a little difficult to see from the plans that we have right now and from the technical reports how some of those connections are gonna be made. Typical questions, but you know, if we don't ask them, we don't know. So, and again, some of this is, you know, more kind of engineering, you know, talk, so it's a little not too stimulating, but we'll go through them. Note 10 references structures being 1 inch below pavement. Is this referencing final grades of the top course of asphalt applied, or is the top course to follow, you know, a base binder course during phase work? This is for some locations where there's gonna be pavement on the site. You know, show us those details in the plan. Give us a cross section that shows how you're gonna construct that. Let's see. General storm note number 4 refers to footing drains that are not shown. In some of the engineering report, we're noticing they describe one thing in the report, but it's not necessarily shown on the plans. We wanna make sure the reports and the plans are linked and are in sync with each other, and there's actually quite a bit of that. I think that's due to the fact that, you know, there was a lot of detail to put together very quickly, and we expect those kinds of anomalies. You know, our next round should smooth most of that out, and we should have those details, you know, where we need to see them. Let's see, an environmental note that typically should go on the plan. Provide appropriate recognitions of necessary permits and recognizing the removal of underground storage tanks and demo. That's one of their environmental notes. Let's see, there's some more notes in here about the demolition. The existing 54-inch beech tree should have an area around it delineated as no equipment or activity allowed to protect its root structure. We want to see that note on the plan. Again, for the contractor, you know, the beech tree is an important part of this project. We don't want contractors running equipment back and forth over the root structure or compacting the soil. You know, we had agreed, and the applicants had agreed that they were gonna, you know, protect that drip line area. So having that note on the plan is gonna be helpful. Right?
Drawing C101 pertains to the subdivision plan.
Mhm.
Is the subdivision plan in accordance with the village code? Have you reviewed it for the village?
Anna's looking at that now. Were you gonna report on that at the next meeting? It appears as if it is, from what we can tell.
You're talking about from a technical standpoint, Arnie?
Technical, yeah.
Technical, yeah, technical, that would need to be done. We need to confirm that the lot sizes, that the lot widths,
Yep.
that the dimension, the requirements are met
Yep.
with regard to these. So that's something that
Yeah,
should be done.
I was more concerned about the design requirements as specified in the village code for subdivision design.
What did you have, what was?
Well, you have a drawing in here that's drawing, C301, which provides the driveway profiles. But the driveway profiles seem not to agree with the design provisions of the subdivision plan.
Of the code, you mean?
Right, well, yeah,
Yeah.
chapter
111, chapter
111.
111.
Okay.
Yeah.
can look into that.
Yeah,
I mean, a typical example is that the entranceway is not to exceed 3% grade for the first 50
Right.
feet. And when you look at C 301, you find that's not the case, the
Right.
profile.
Yep.
And also there are stipulated percentages of grade for major or collection roads and for minor roads. And it appears again that
right.
some of the roads here, especially the one coming in near Building 2,
Yep.
exceeds these design requirements.
Yep. Yeah, we'll look at that, Ernie, and we'll point that out. All right, what else do we have? Just a general note, this was off the sheets C 104, 105, and 106. There's concern for the grade of the sidewalks along Butterfield Road being over 5%, and in some areas above typical slopes for handicap ramps. These walks have handicap ramps leading to them, and concern is for the winter conditions and handicap access. Indicate locations of proposed handicap ramps and landings. We don't wanna have a toboggan run down that road for folks, you know, in wheelchairs or anything else. 5% is pretty steep. As proposed now, we are looking kind of at 10% slopes, which is unacceptable. So, you know, we're gonna work with the applicants to kind of come up with some ideas to potentially redesign some of those sidewalk areas. It's relatively steep, you know, through there. And for handicap accessibility, you know, those percentages just won't work, so.
Well, there was also the question, as far as cut and fill for the utilities, you know, on
Yeah,
that road
that's,
as well too.
that's in here as well. There was the overburden issue, if you remember the water main, the existing water main that runs up the west side or the north side of the site. Their initial grading plan showed them cutting almost too much away from that hillside where they were gonna, you know, potentially expose the existing water main. You know, in this climate, you've gotta have, you know, 48 inches, give or take, minimum, you know, overburden, so. You know, as they start to look at their grading plan, those design issues start to pop up, you know, and they'll have to make those adjustments, so we'll see how they deal with that.
I didn't mean to jump ahead, sorry.
No, that's fine. Yeah, but that's one of those, you know, kind of important details that, you know, you pick up on when you start to physically design the site, you start to see, you know, what's out there and what's moving. Proposed grading for the northerly parking area spaces near the parking island west of Building 2 mimics existing non-paved grades in excess of 20%. Can't have that. 20% is obviously far too much. On an icy surface, you park a car and 20% is gonna slide without much effort. You could literally step out of the car and give it a shove. So they'll have to look at that as well and regrade that. Again, a typical question, are curbs proposed along the front entrances to the buildings? We think they are, but, you know, indicate all handicap ramp locations, provide ramps adjacent to handicap parking, as well as for entrances to the buildings. You know, we wanna look at some of those configurations and some of those details, you know, to make sure that they fit. This was your comment here, Barney. Cut grades past station 2+0 at the Butterfield Road. Will indicate replacing existing water main where there's insufficient earth cover. You know, again, that's that comment, if, you know, worst comes to worst, and their new grading plan can't achieve the maximum overburden that we need, they may have to bury the water main deeper, just to get it, you know, get it into the necessary cover. So we'll see what they can come up with. You know, I think the other important thing too is to suggest that, you know, we don't wanna design necessarily the site for them. They have their consultants to do that, but we wanna make sure that the designs work and are efficient. In other communities, you know, we've had projects where, you know, the applicants have come in and said, well, you know, why don't you guys design the site? You know, you can hire, you know, your engineer to come in and just design the site, and that's not what we're here for. You know, we're here to make sure that what they do design is accurate and works well. You know, we can certainly, you know, work with them, and that's what we always propose to do. It just makes a much more efficient process, but our engineers aren't gonna design their parking lots or their slopes or those kinds of things, so. You know, one of the details that was missing that we're gonna wanna see is legends in all the plan sheets, and we'll work with them to kind of, you know, be very specific about what we wanna see. Show existing utilities in the Route 9D right-of-way, that show pipes and that will need to be avoided It also shows sizes, rims, invert elevations to verify where they're located and any conflicts with existing or proposed infrastructure. You know, it's important we know where all those utilities are out there on 9D, especially as they start to work in and around, you know, some of those areas. We need to know where they are, and certainly we need to know for interconnect purposes. You know, they're gonna have to show us those details when we start looking at sewer connections down at the bottom of the hill. With the new water main configuration that they've been discussing, we're gonna wanna see where those connects are, new hydrants. Again, it's detail, but, you know, if you don't ask for it, you don't get it. And it just makes it easier with that level of detail to really know how things all pull together. Typical question we ask, is the 911 and fire department okay with the 3 roads all having the name Butterfield within them? We've gotten comments back, and certainly, you know, that the applicants have been working with fire services and the county 911 services to come up, I think, with some different naming nomenclature, just to make it easier for emergency services, you know, to get in.
Yeah, I think the subdivision requirements of chapter 111 deals also with the naming of
Naming,
roads.
yeah.
Right,
And it
name-
stipulates certain things that you can and cannot do.
Yep. Yeah, it's interesting, and correct me, is Matt here? Correct me if I'm wrong, I think, Matt, it's the county, is here?
Here.
I think it's the county that sets the actual names now, for 911 purposes. Matt, for the nomenclature for names, road names,
Yes.
it was the county, wasn't it,
Yes,
that sets that?
but Bill Wazarski and Josh were also contacted, and Bill is reaching out to the county. We have no issue with changing
Yeah,
the names, you know, whatever the preference is,
yep,
but that's being looked into.
okay, thanks. So, you know, we'll see the names change, I'm sure. You know, emergency services comes onto the site and they don't know if it's Butterfield Avenue, Butterfield Place, but, you know, let's make it a little bit clearer for them. Let's see. The design, and this is kind of a general comment, the design of the stormwater management system on the plans, there's detail missing. It's tough to see it physically on the plans when you start to look at the plan sheets where some of the interconnects are, how some of the bioretention filter systems and the underground storage systems are gonna interconnect. The engineer's reports describe it in some detail, you know, in terms of pipe sizes, types of fittings that they're going to be used, as depths of those fittings, you know, profile information. But again, it's a little bit of a disconnect from what is in the engineering report versus what's on the plan. You know, we're gonna need the applicant to bring, you know, that information basically together. And that'll happen over the next probably iteration. We'll see that level of detail come online. So that then we can really see how, you know, water flows from the point it hits the roof, till it runs down the drain, till it, you know, downspouts, till it hits the, you know, the first treatment facility, till it hits the filters, till it hits, you know, the absorption basin, you know, we need to kind of see all that. And again, that kind of goes to another comment that's probably buried in here a little bit further, but, we started running some of their HydroCAD, analysis for the stormwater management. You know, they've created some models to show how they're gonna handle the stormwater and the rates of flow, and the infiltration, rates. But we're gonna need a little more information on some of that data to kind of really make the models make sense, so. But again, it's a work in progress, you know, we expect, you know, these kinds of things when we start to see the first round of plans. And that information will come through. Let's see, what else do we have that kind of makes sense? We talk about some hydrants in here and the locations of those. Again, you know, a general comment, please include all meets and bounds and existing easements on the site plan. We know they're out there, they've shown them on other plans, but we need them on, you know, the specific plan sheets that they should be on. Please include contour labels for existing and proposed contours throughout the site. Again, it's a general comment, but it's information that we need on the plans. Let's see, we talked about 911. You know, again, a kind of a general comment, light pole foundations. You know, when they're gonna propose light poles in the parking lots, we need to see kind of a profile and a cross-section of those foundations, you know, how they're gonna be built, and literally where they're gonna be placed, and are there any utilities underneath there? that they might interfere with. And you think of a light pole, it's not just a stick in the ground, it's, something on a foundation. And where those conduits running back and forth, those light poles are gonna be. Those are all the details that'll be emerging. Driveway profile, sheet 301. Driveways to building 6 in the first part of Butterfield Court provides are 5% and 10% respectively. They're relatively flat when you start to look at this. You could have some ponding issues in there, and you could have some water issues in there. We're gonna wanna kind of work with them, I think, on those grades. And again, these are kind of by sheet up here, so we'll kind of skip some of those. Here's another one. Verify that concrete sidewalk proposed is 5 feet wide without the curb. Right now, the details don't necessarily show that on the plans, so we want to work on that.
Chapter 111 also deals with minimum
Yep.
minimum pitches on the roads and stuff.
Make sure we get that in. All right, water and sewer report. These are comments based on the water and sewer report. The report indicates the maximum fire flow of 450 gallons per minute is required. The report should clearly document that the village system is capable of providing the necessary flows. Now, we know from our discussions early on with the village DPW that they have certainly sufficient, capacity up there. But the engineering report we want to show, basically prove that out. So that'll be a detail we'll throw in. Let's see. Pipe sizes, we want to make sure the pipe sizes are consistent in the narrative, between the narrative and the calculation section of the report. Right now, it's a little difficult, some of that detail's not in that report, so we want to make sure that that's there. The extension of the sanitary sewer to serve the new facilities, which will be dedicated to the village, will need DEC approval. We want to make sure that they initiate their permit process with DEC as that starts to move forward. Again, a typo, references to town should be changed to village, for some of these issues. Yep, all right.
But I have a question here. I understand that there is sufficient capacity in the plant itself, but how would they propose to demonstrate that the system between the site and the plant has adequate capacity, the existing system?
They need to look at the existing pipes that are gonna serve the site, along with the folks at DPW, and basically say, yes, there's enough capacity and volume there to certainly handle this interconnect. We've gotten that initially. We met on site with the DPW folks, and they said that they have no concerns in this area with the water system. And they even were prescribing certain pipe sizes to the applicants for interconnect to make sure that the flow was there, so.
Okay, but
That's
taking
why-
the sewer,
Go ahead.
all right, go ahead.
No, that's why they came up the 8-inch main for on-site,
Yeah, right, yeah.
and reducing that to
Yeah, that was
6.
recommended by village DPW, that size.
I guess my question is that, do they know what the current or the current flow is?
Yeah,
They have data to that effect?
it should be in the report. I don't have the report with me, but the numbers were there. My wastewater guys were telling me that, the data that they were providing were there.
So they have their data anticipated from the new project, they have the
Right.
data from the
The existing
existing,
DPW, yeah.
and they have all the design data on
Yeah.
the interface between.
That was also, as I recall, from the site visit where Greg Phillips made the suggestion about changing the routing of the loop system.
For the water,
For the
yeah.
water, yeah.
Yeah, Greg was very helpful when we met with him a couple weeks ago, I think it was now. And the applicant's engineers were out there as well to really kind of get a sense, where he felt, there might have been some issues. And, we had, if you remember early on, we had prescribed, maybe the notion of, going in and looking at some of the sanitary sewer lines, from the lower end of the site further in towards the village. And, we were gonna suggest, that they go in and they send a TV down, remote control TV to look at, the first 1,000 feet of line. And Greg's like, no, he goes, this line is in really good shape. He said, we wanna make sure that the manhole that they're gonna interconnect in for the sewer system
So you're saying Greg has looked at the interior of the sewer system
Greg
that they're
said,
tying into?
he must have, because he said, they felt that there were no issues, and, we offered to have the applicants, at their own expense, look at that, and he goes, no, because we don't need to.
There must be a report on that he's had it done.
Yeah, I
Well, I
don't
know
know.
they've looked at
camera
some
work on it,
systems, and I know they had
Yeah,
inflow problems,
Right,
and I know
exactly.
have root system problems and
yeah,
certain
because
systems.
Arnie, we asked about that in this section, and he said there's no I&I issues that they're aware of.
Mhm.
Have the village TV did? I don't know. I don't know what Greg's done in terms of his investigations, but, he was confident that, there wouldn't be any issues. His big issue was making sure that the manhole that they interconnect in gets basically rebuilt and replaced. Because the existing one that's down there is, I think, a
He
little.
says it's a little, and yeah, as far as the easement for any one of the manhole to be rebuilt,
Correct.
part of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Do you know how old the system is they're tying into?
That I don't know. Greg didn't give us that information.
I think some of that system is fairly new. Some of the
It
storm
sounds like it.
system that goes, because of the senior citizen housing that exists over there.
Did they have to replace a lot of that? when they-
I don't, I'm not sure, but it
Yeah.
might,
And that was what, 15 years ago?
I think it'd be
Chuck.
worth looking at to see how old the system is they're tying into.
Along those lines, what I'm suggesting is, when you get the actual flow counts,
Yeah,
right, is find out from Greg, at least have him append the report in
Yeah.
terms of why he's confident and what the age of the system is.
yeah, will do.
Because if there's
Yeah, Greg
any
is-
question or discrepancy, let's find out what it is now.
Yep.
I agree, Greg is very good, and
Yeah, and they had, the village's consulting engineer that Greg uses was on the site as well. Remember the name? I don't have it with me.
Well, let's append it to the memo, so at
Yep.
least we can reference where that confidence is coming from.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you.
Same kind of thing with water. Some of the water main notes, the proposed new water main, show the easement area and make sure that it's kept clear to provide access for the proposed utilities. Again, kind of a note here, construction on the road right-of-way should read within the road right-of-way. Simple notes, but,
yeah, I have the same concern
Yeah.
about water. We know that we have sufficient capacity in the plant. We know we've done the cleaning of the main itself.
yeah.
But my concern is that between the main and the site, we really know the condition of the existing systems.
No,
And again,
I'll get
we-
that from Greg as well.
Yeah. Greg may have, insight, they may have done
Yep,
some system checks and stuff over the years.
yep. Okay, make sure we add that in. Let's see. Again, for water, and again, these are just kind of, minutia details. Consider installation of interval valves along the water main so that you can isolate and repair sections of it. It's just one of those key things. And we can certainly work with their engineer to kind of locate some of those potential, valve locations. Show and label all water services and their sizes. The plans right now are a little lacking some of that detail, so we wanna see that. The water main connection along Paulding Avenue will require an additional bend to make a perpendicular connection. Please indicate on the plans, show it. Additionally, the connection to the main along Paulding Avenue will require a reducer to reduce the proposed main from 8 inches down to 6. That's something that Greg had asked for. We had asked if he wanted to interconnect and extend an 8-inch line down Paulding, and he said no. He said the existing 8 that's out there is fine. Just interconnect with a 6 to loop it back through the site. So essentially, the water main is proposed is going to create kind of an inner loop through the site, as you can see on the plans.
The existing is 6 inch.
On Paulding it is.
On both.
The other
Right,
one
but
is
on
eight.
9 is
is
8.
Yeah, yeah. Again, sheet 302, how are significant grade changes along the profile of the water main to be accomplished? Show us that profile sheet. What we want to see is basically a profile of the water main, and you'll see it, basically in 2 dimensions, the elevations of that main as it creeps up through the site and around the site. Some of that information is here, but we want to see that, in plain detail. Hydrant details, and again, this is kind of a nitty-gritty design issue, but I'll read it just for the the sake of information, the hydrant detail does not have a crushed stone with filter fabric envelope for hydrant barrel weep. You know, that's one of those technical engineering terms. But it's one of those things that's, you know, critical to the installation of the hydrant. These will not be manually drained unless there are significantly high groundwater tables. So in other words, you know, design your hydrants and their foundations so that, you know, you don't need to physically go in and you know, maintain them and take care of them other than, you know, the back flushing that's typical with those things. Another good one, you know, grading around the proposed building 2 should be reviewed in terms of proposed slope. Where proposed grading begins just northwest of building 2, grade cuts will likely remove cover over the existing water main. This is what we talked about
Right.
before. The main may require reburial. And again, location of handicap stalls for building 3 should be located adjacent to the elevators. You know, again, it's one of those things that, you know, it's a detail. This was another interesting one that we met with fire services. Fire department should review hydrant locations and general layout with respect to, you know, prior meeting requests. We actually did that on site, and they recommended, I think, 2 additional hydrants and locations on the sites, and they're on the plans. You know, one was down, I don't remember where they were. One was near building 2, the commercial building, on 9D, and the other one was interior, again, for locations, so. You know, again, a typical thing we wanna see, but it's, you know, the detail has to be put in. Ownership of supply lines to the property should be determined with respect to metering and easements. You know, who's gonna own the lines and where? You know, is the village gonna own the lines? If so, they need easements to be able to get in there, if they need to replace the lines. Where the meter's gonna be located. You know, will this site have a master meter, or will there be individual meters, you know, for individual, users and buildings? You know, we're still working those details out. Let's see. Let's jump into the sewer stuff here. This is just general notes for the rest of the water stuff. Ownership of supply lines, again, to the property, we wanna know who's gonna own the sewers. Typically, the village takes those over once they're constructed and certified. DOT work permits required for any, you know, curb cuts or any work in the highway right away. Show us that. The existing sanitary sewer line will be crossed now less than 3 times for the construction of other utilities. In other words, you know, you wanna make sure you bury your sewer line so that any other utilities that crisscross over that line or below that line are accommodated. You know, you gotta start thinking in 3 dimensions now. You know, because theoretically from here and talking with Greg, you know, the sewers will be all gravity flow downhill. But it's not like you just lay the sewer line down and not, you know, understand where the water lines go, where the power lines go, or anything else that's buried. So we need to see all that. That's the detail we wanna see. Consideration be given to connecting the sanitary sewer from building 3, 4, and 5 to the sewer main closer to sewer manhole number 1 on the plans, in order to avoid the need to cross other utilities. Again, there might just be a more efficient way to run, you know, certain connections from buildings, you know, to the mains, whether they're sewer and water. So we'll have them look at some of those. And these are kind of the things that we point out, you know, in these plans. You know, again, for sewer, indicate the gravity sewer lateral clean-out locations on the plans. They have to, you know, have certain clean-out locations along that sewer main. Show us where they're gonna be, and show us how you're gonna do that. Stormwater, jump into some of those comments. This is kind of a general note. Overall, the stormwater system is difficult to follow right now as it's designed. Stormwater routing is unclear from the plans, details, and provided SWIP documents. It would be advantageous to provide location-specific details for the stormwater practices, including elevations, including water quality volume, you know, the 1 year, the 10 year, the 100-year peak elevations for where they're gonna be on their profiles, a routing diagram, and clearly identifying with the narrative and complete extent of the proposed system. So in other words, you know, the SWIP is good, the plans are good, but we need to make them jive, yeah. That's really what that's saying, it's kind of, you know, work that together. And when we meet with the applicants, we'll walk them through, you know, that, you know, the very detailed, you know, sections in the plan where, you know, we need to see that worked out. Let's see. Again, you know, it's unclear how the ADS stormwater system is providing pre-treatment. It appears the system will provide storage only, but we need to see filtering.
What type of pre-treatment would you expect?
It's probably gonna be some sort of filtering system. We'll have to see exactly what they propose. I know Brad Grant, our stormwater engineer, was gonna work with them on some different ideas and thoughts for that.
Is there pre-treatment anywhere in the village at this time?
I don't know.
I'm not aware of any.
Probably not.
No.
No, because you haven't had any new development since the new DEC regs came in, that I know of. You know, residential doesn't count, so, you know, this has to subscribe to all the new DEC regs. You know, they were basically new in March last year.
So you're
which
looking
requires it.
at filtration and?
Some form, yeah, yeah. So we'll see what their ideas are for that. Let's see. Have some notes in
Can
there.
you also
about-
just, I mean, on that regard, because this reg only came in last year,
Yeah.
and it's, as far as commercial,
Yep,
can you really make sure that there's a lot of detail in terms of the calculation?
yeah,
Because I'm assuming this is, you know, a new application, at least as far as the village is concerned.
yep.
And I know it's not gonna be an issue with the perk testing or anything like that, but,
Now, what we'll do is, we're gonna basically take all the data and run it through our HydroCAD models to see that it works correctly under the new regulations. I'm not exactly sure, Brad's not, you know, didn't speak to, you know, what modeling that the applicants use, but we'll make sure that the two models, you know, work out and the details are there, so.
but also, in terms of the note, at least for the technical memo after the HydroCAD regs are done, can you do a detailed expanded explanation
Yep,
in terms of the calculation, because this is gonna be new material?
yep,
Thank you.
It was also noted that all stormwater was gonna be contained on site,
yeah,
right?
yep. So that's what we wanna make sure, is that, you know, their design,
Gonna carry
the
that on.
details of that design accomplish that goal.
Okay.
So, you know, again, kind of just a typical thing, is, indicate under the pavement, or permanent vegetative cover, section 1-2, that the soil will be, scarified and decompacted. In other words, you know, when you start to design these systems, you don't wanna have compacted soils over the top, they obviously won't work. There's a water bar proposed at the south end of Butterfield Road, the steep end to prevent washout of the site soils from the road onto 9D. Currently, one's not shown. This is during construction. You know, you have runoff down some of the roads, you know, before you have ground cover that's established. You know, show us how you're gonna deal with any kind of those events.
Isn't there collection basins there at the base of the road?
They do, but during construction, the basins may not be totally operational, you know, yet. So we wanna make sure that nothing really gets off the site.
I think there are two existing basins in Route 9D there, one on each side of the road.
Yeah, they may not, DOT may not allow them to access those basins, in the right of way. So, you know, again, they wanna try to mitigate everything on their own site, even during construction, so. Let's see. There are several general plan, cleanup items such as conflicting text and missing information, such as the CB sump depths, you know, labeling issues, you know, those kinds of things. Again, it's detailed, but it's important detail in the reports that we wanna make sure we get. You know, sheet one, C105, you know, here's a comment. Single-family lot roof drains, the three proposed single-family buildings, should be rerouted to avoid, tree protection. The first set of plans showed some of those diversion areas coming back into where the beech tree area is, or crisscrossing it.
I don't think you meant to say avoid tree protection,
No,
Take care of it.
avoid
right?
impacting the tree, yeah. So, if you look at it, you know, some of the subground, underground, you know, runoff drains kind of cut through that area, cut a little close to it. So that's easy enough to fix.
We actually showed on the plan, on that detail, it showed lot 3 actually encroaching on the drip
Yeah.
line.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
so that's what it was. Rainwater harvesting areas should be detailed. We haven't seen those yet on the plans, but it's part of the plan set. It was part of their SIP, so we wanna make sure we have those details in there. You know, again, pipe dimensions, rim, and invert elevations should be shown on all the plans. You know, wherever they put a stormwater structure, you know, show us it, give us a plan detail that literally shows it. And as you guys have gone through the plans, that, you know, there's a lot of detail sheets in here that show all those individual little details, but, you know, we wanna make sure that they're accurate and they're correct. You know, again, the nomenclature used on the drainage, rims and inverts table, provided on the grading utility plan doesn't correspond necessarily to the nomenclature used on the structures shown on the sheets. You know, we'll work with our engineers to make sure we get that sorted out. You know, this was one of the kind of interesting things, you know, provide flow areas on the plans. For a lot of this, the storm drains, you know, the drain lines are shown, but the flow direction isn't shown. You know, it's just kind of a nitty gritty detail, but we wanna see it. It helps, you know, to kind of better understand how the system's gonna work. You know, again, we talked about this earlier, indicate locations of connection points for all roof drains and footing drains. Show us where those are. Let's see. Proposed infiltrator number 1, this is a stormwater infiltrator, is shown on the upper and lower plaza areas. Spot elevations should be shown to assure vertical separation from the underground system and the proposed finished grade. You know, in other words, when you have your finished parking lot grade, and then you have, you know, your infiltrator underneath those lots, you know, show us what those depths are so we can, you know, understand, you know, really how it all fits together. Is the grade of the ground shown on existing or proposed? This is sheet 302, talking about utility profiles. Show and label both. You know, what kind of high density pipe, storm drain pipe is proposed. You know, we're recommending SDR 35 as a PVC reference, but, you know, we need to see the detail. You know, show us exactly what type of pipe you're gonna use there. You know, again, there's a double-walled, smoother interior pipe proposed. You know, show us the profile, show us the design type of the pipe, so we know. Let's see. We recommend use of the New York State DEC Blue Book standard for details for inlet protection and construction entrance, which may need to be 24 feet wide for two-way traffic. Again, this is stormwater. You know, the DEC Blue Book is really kind of the go-to manual for stormwater management practices. And again, we're talking about, you know, as you're moving, you know, construction vehicles on and off the site, you know, on one dedicated entrance, how you're gonna protect that entrance from, you know, potential, you know, washouts or, you know, overflows or things like that. Talking about some of the management systems, we're recommending a cascade type catch basin. Grades for catch basins 4 and 5. There's a trench drain proposed across Butterfield Road at the bottom. You know, where does this detail apply? You know, again, it's kind of a standard question that we ask. You know, show us where those catch basins are gonna be, show us how they're gonna be designed, show us how they're gonna function. And that detail comes. Again, kind of with the catch basins, the frames, the grates and covers indicated on the storm drainage manhole and catch basin details are no longer available from the Campbell Foundry. You know, show us an alternative. The Campbell Foundry was kind of a detail that, you know, a lot of folks would kind of fall back on, you know, for years, because they were really the only ones who kind of made those types of structures. But now all of a sudden, you know, I guess they're out of business, so gotta find somebody new. Indicate material used as joint filter or filler for the catch basins and manholes. When they construct the manholes with the catch basins on top, you know, the village may have preferential types of materials that they wanna see those constructed out of. You know, again, show us that detail, show us how that's gonna work. You know, another detail, storm pipe bedding, detail note number 1, indicates the use of compacted existing subsoil. When laid above groundwater, existing subgrade is too consistent. We'd like to see, you know, the use of, you know, 3/4 inch stone. You know, you get right down to the level of detail of how big the stone should be in some of these sub-base areas and some of these, you know, footing areas and certainly some of these, you know, piping and utility areas. It's important to know. Let's see. You know, again, this was kind of one based on the drawings. It was unclear how water is conveyed to the 2 bioretention areas. It appears the roof drains leading from building 6 feet into the northeastern bioretention area, but no information is provided regarding the roof drains themselves. Please clarify how water is to be conveyed to these practices. And again, please provide the details of outlet protections to be used for locations which discharge. Again, another design issue, but we need to see it. We need to see where that's gonna go and how that's gonna interconnect. Pre and post development, runoff figures need to be in full size with clear and easy to follow catchment area delineations. Provide mapping. The provided mapping is difficult to follow. Please provide flow paths, lengths, conditions, slope, etc. Description provided in the narrative does not include all of the identified catchment areas. Again, just, a little bit of inconsistency between the reports and the design details, and that'll get worked out. Harvested rainwater will be used for irrigation. Pump will pump the irrigation system. Is it mentioned in the description, the water supply in the system will be supplemented by a new well, to be strictly used for the purposes during dry condition? Again, show us the well. This is the kind of the on-site irrigation system, and there was discussion of having a well as a backup for that. Show us the location and how that's gonna interconnect. Let's see. Sheet C-106, this is part of the stormwater management plan. Watershed map is combined to the existing parcel. The watershed map they gave us just shows the existing parcel. Is there any stormwater runoff from adjacent sites that currently comes onto this site now? It would appear there is not, except maybe from the west. All run-on must be accounted for in practice's size for total drainage area tributary to them. In other words, if the site now is accepting runoff from additional parcels, how are they gonna handle that and how are they gonna deal with it? Especially, the thought is up near Paulding, the
But-
north, the upper end.
There is one discharge point on site coming off from Paulding. There's
Yeah.
a pipe that goes down in the road and discharges out onto the field.
Yep. So we need to know how they're gonna handle,
Yeah, you can
that
see, you
outside.
can see it now because of the, the vegetation and everything. There's already a clump of bushes out there.
Yep, okay.
And it's coming, I'm not sure how many catch basins it's picking up, but there's at least one catch basin
Yeah, I
that's
would think.
on Paulding that's dumping out.
We'll have a look at that and find out. Let's see. Test pit locations, 2 locations for test pit 8 are shown, but test pit 6 is missing. Again, just one of those details we wanna see. In the stormwater management report itself, provide updated post-development watershed map. Indicates that runoff from the proposed residential properties will be conveyed to structure 5 and 7. Please clarify how the roof drains, affect the drainage in that area. Again, it's just updating that report to make sure that it's clear about how they're gonna be dealing with those issues. Test pit data, please provide the date when the test pits were completed, indicate the project name on the provided data. Please clarify where the infiltration tests were completed. We have a general sense from our first run of infiltration pits that they did where they are, but, the actual set that they gave us, we wanted to make sure we have, a little bit better definition. Landscaping comments, again, these are, kind of the first run at landscaping. Sheet G1, measures to protect trees and consequences of construction damage need to be spelled out and incorporated into the general notes and utility notes. The legend should include symbols used for tree protection. Proper practices for underground utility work, such as excavating and trenching within the drip line of all trees to be retained, should be incorporated into either a general note for work around trees to be retained or into the utility notes. We talked last time about some of those adjacent trees.
Yeah, chapter 111 also has requirements pertaining to existing on-site trees.
Let me make sure we reference that.
And also during the EAF, we had the survey done.
Yep.
So in terms of identifying what's to be retained,
Yep.
as well as what's to be removed, it's not really clear on the plans.
Right. Let's see, measures to protect trees and consequences of construction damage to trees to be retained need to be spelled out again in the general notes. And these were just, sheet by sheet, comments. The Butterfield Road grading exceeds accessibility standards. This kind of goes back to that comment we made earlier. Sidewalks are shown at up to a 10% gradient adjacent to the road. However, railings, steps, and landings are not detailed. Indicate an accessible route as an alternative to this connection, or how these sidewalks can be accomplished at acceptable ADA standards. Show us the details, or we're gonna have to look at that and probably redesign some of those sidewalks. This is off sheet L401, again, the landscaping comments. Plant materials are generally shown in acceptable sizes and appropriate locations for solar exposure. Tree installation details should be provided for both deciduous and evergreen installation, and should include a relevant staking information. In other words, give us a detail how you're gonna basically plant your trees. If you look at most landscaping plans, not only does it show you, in one dimension where, the landscaping elements are gonna go, but then there's a detail sheet that goes with it that shows, how you're gonna basically plant those trees and stabilize them until they've catched on or caught on, so. The retaining wall from building 2 along the Route 90 frontage is inadequately screened. This wall is a maximum of 9 feet in height and will be a significant visual element from 9D without additional plantings at the foot of the wall. Starting to look at the design elements and how you can soften those with landscaping. And we'll certainly, work with their landscape architect to go through some of this in more detail.
Excuse me, Chuck, on the
Yep.
landscaping detail, because it was a late sheet addition, is also when you sit down with their landscape architect, we're gonna wanna see a census information of what the proposed plantings are.
Yep.
In terms of size, circumference,
That should all be included on the detail sheet, but we'll make sure we.
just make sure since it wasn't on the initial go around.
Yep. Okay. Additional evergreen planting should be provided for the parking areas that directly access Route 9D at Building 1. And we have some notes on the plans, we'll show the applicant, where those are. Foundation plants and street trees should be provided along the 9D facade of Building 1. Additional street trees should be provided along the Route 90 frontage between Building 1 and the Gateway Park. We'll work with them, we'll have our landscape architect work with ours to kind of, show those locations and enhance those areas. Again, Barney, this goes to your comments. Trees shown that are to be retained should be identified on the plans. The landscaping and planting beds should be delineated with a line in the plan, and an edging detail should be provided. Again, show us how you're gonna, where they're gonna be and how you're gonna locate those beds. The retaining wall and fence is indicated near the midpoint of the north property line, which appears to significantly disturb the root zones of 2 large trees on adjacent properties. What measures will be taken to ensure the survival of those trees? We talked about that, I think, last time. As retaining walls are built, potentially right along property lines, you're gonna have to obviously, encroach on the neighbor's property to actually construct that wall. You can't, necessarily carve it from one side. And, what are the potential impacts on, adjacent trees? Several plants are not identified in the plant list. Again, we'll work those details out. Identify the plants shown in front of the Leahy Pavilion facing Route 9D. Identify the plants shown along the north property line near buildings 4 and 5. The lighting plan should indicate on a separate sheet the light coverage areas and light levels broadcast on the parcel and over the property line. Ted was able to get some comments in here on lighting. To adjacent properties via an analysis to industry standards. The light fixture shown does not appear to be a downward type that limits impacted areas. We wanted to see, that lighting detail. We talked about that last time. Show us the type of lighting, structure you're gonna use to make sure it's downcast. In addition to that, the type of light, type of bulb is gonna be used. We wanna know. I think the goal is to, avoid, the bright white parking lots that you see in some areas that have, kind of very muted on-site lighting, but make sure that it's safe. It is recommended that all easements be a minimum of 20 feet in width, with additional rights of ingress and egress to other adjoining properties as necessary. These are just some general comments. Other utility coordination and proposed locations should be noted on the site plans for things like phone, TV, gas, cable, fiber optics, things like that. And one of the additional comments we had, will the proposed uses in the municipal office building require a backup electrical generator? If so, show where it's gonna be, show us the pad. Most municipal buildings these days have backup generators, for obvious reasons, for emergency services, so show us, if that's the case, where that'll be. And I had some additional comments, so that's basically, the bulk of the comments, the technical comments, that we had. I had some additional comments, regarding, circulation that I had one of our traffic guys take a look at. Let me just
Excuse
go
me, Chuck,
through.
just before you go into
Yeah.
that, to go back under utility where you have coordination of phone, TV, electric, and gas.
Yeah,
There has to be some conversation and delineation in terms of satellite dishes,
yeah.
right? How they're gonna be, if they're gonna be allowed, how they're gonna be obscured. I mean, we don't want it looking like a listening post.
Right.
I don't know if that's governed, if that'd be under the HOA or whatever, but have a plan detail that speaks to that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Also, has the cell tower been addressed yet?
No. It's being discussed as part of the design of the building, but I don't know, where they've gone yet with that actual facility, so we'll see.
So
Yeah,
that
they-
might have a generator also.
Yeah, the initial thought was that, obviously, that facility's gonna be contained in some sort of structure, below or something along those lines, or clock tower or something. But no, that's a good point.
Well, we're gonna wanna see where and if that is fairly soon.
Yep.
Do we have any more information about materials for sidewalks and driveways? Because, again,
Not yet.
I'll bring up the permeable stuff.
Yep.
And also, I agree on the lighting. If, I think we have to be very conscious of trying to have it so it's more night sky kind of lighting. Otherwise, that could be one great big light pollutant. And there's been some interesting articles that, having spots of bright light are more dangerous than having a larger area of low light,
Yeah.
because your eyes cannot adjust.
Yeah, we'll point that out and see if.
In the
what they-
material we have, there's discussion of parking and drawing parking.
Yeah,
Are you going to address that at some other time and
for the parking design,
Spaces.
layout, space
Layout,
used?
yeah.
And
Yeah.
we've expressed
Yeah.
concern before that there is more parking than is required. And that troubles us, and back to the landscape plan, it would have significant impact on the
Yeah.
landscape plan
Yeah,
if more of the parking area could be landscaped.
yeah, especially
And-
along the north
And
side.
what are the criteria? And it seems to me that, what you want is landscaping where visible from the street.
Yeah,
I think one of the
as much as
things,
possible.
one of the issues about this property is that it's always been a pretty big green space, even, especially as it got decrepit. And the stuff grew up in the parking lot.
Mhm.
And I think I would like to see more emphasis in the landscaping on shielding some of the, not just the buildings, that, the big parking spaces. And I think it will be a much nicer way of approaching the village. And I think we should look at it from every single side of the property.
yeah, that's a good point.
We specifically talked about, again, the problematic nature of the grade, and the opportunity with the backfill for the utility lines and if there's a way of breaking up that parking so it's plateaued and maybe reconfiguring some of the handicap access spaces
Yep.
and incorporating that into the island or a landscape design. Because there was also some question, which I didn't see in this initial pass in terms of notes, what we were doing in terms of the dumpster enclosures.
Right.
Right, there was some question about that not being completely delineated throughout the last iteration that we saw.
Yeah, that was actually one of the follow-up comments,
Okay.
that we had.
And I didn't see that on the memo, so
No.
I don't know if it was addressed or it just kind of dropped off.
No, it was in here. Where was it? It was kind of related to deliveries
Okay.
of equipment, where deliveries proposed for buildings 1 and 2, where deliveries proposed generally for, all the buildings, how our truck's going to come in, show us the loading dock areas,
Right.
how they're going to be defined. Please confirm that delivery trucks can access these areas and get in and out, show locations of dumpsters and the designs for those dumpsters and closures, Typically, you want them to mirror the buildings, you want them to be some form of masonry, not chain link. Closures are not, obviously a dumpster kind of sitting in the corner somewhere. So we'll make sure we add that in. The site proposes a concrete pad between buildings 1 and around 9D. Please confirm what this pad will be used for. It appears that the proposed concrete pad will conflict with the existing pedestrian flashing beacon and signpost. Show us what that is. I'm not exactly sure what that detail is.
Could I
What
just,
I'm-
hang on, oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Also on building 1, it's showing a loading dock facing south.
Yeah.
How is that going to be? What kind of details can we get on that, what that might look like?
Yep.
Karen?
The other thing is, when we're talking about generators, we spoke in one of our very first sessions about emergency generators in the buildings because there will be elevators, if I'm not
Mhm.
mistaken.
Right, for life safety, you're gonna need that.
Yeah,
They were mentioned that they would be downstairs in the parking areas possibly.
possibly,
Mhm.
but how about probably?
Right.
So that detail has to be
Definitely.
incorporated.
Yep.
You made a general comment about the generators, but
Right.
we wanna see,
Specific, details for where they're gonna be located. Okay.
Ann, did you have anything? No. Arnie, anything else? All right, why don't you said you had some additional comments, will you?
I basically just kind of incorporated them quickly, right there at the end. So, what we'll do is we'll take, these additional comments, we'll take our comments and we'll work with the applicants. Again, we have a meeting set up with them tomorrow to walk through, in real detail, have, one engineer talk to the other engineer and speak the same language and basically, work through these details. My sense is in talking with Matt, and Joe Renner, their engineers, that, nothing here is objectionable, in terms of the detail that we're looking for. They should be able to, easily provide it to us. I think it's just a matter of kind of cleaning things up a little bit, getting that going. So my sense is that by the next iteration, the next submission, you'll see all this detail, certainly put on those plans, and then we can, continue on with, looking at, how they're, working the site out, so.
When you're also, because it tracks from iteration to iteration, when you mentioned that you're going to be providing them the technical memo in a Word format and
Yeah.
just allow them to answer your questions, kind of
Yep.
like a 617 part?
Yep.
When you get those answers back, if you would also circulate that to the
Yeah.
board, because it would be easier for us to track that
Yeah.
as a draft, and then we can see the polished memo
Yep.
at the next meeting.
We'll get it in kind of like a red line form, so you can
Okay.
really see how that looks. And then we'll make sure everybody gets that. You can start to kind of see, you can kind of almost follow along in the plans and the reports, where those things will be made. So, I think, with that, we're optimistic that certainly, they can start to really, kind of clean this up a little bit. Have the level of detail that we wanna see and, have it ready hopefully, in the next couple weeks. I'll confirm with Matt and his group tomorrow, that they can meet that timeline. And then we'll go from there.
I see the applicant's engineering team is here. Did they have any, are they here for a reason, or did they have
I
anything to add?
think Paul, you just wanted your guys to come,
If there's
just
any,
listen in. They got a copy,
questions.
obviously, of our memo, so that they know, what we were discussing. Unless they have anything they wanna add.
Mr. Rennan, not to put you on the spot, but I will. Did you hear anything tonight that you take issue with, or a timeline that you think is not realistic?
No, I think we can easily work everything out when we meet.
with the staff tomorrow.
Now, just in terms of realistically, in terms of scheduling, you're gonna be meeting with the staff tomorrow, you have this
Tomorrow.
meeting set up for tomorrow, right? Next, normally what we do is we wanna see something a week before, ahead of schedule, before it comes to us at a meeting. However, next week is the intervening Thanksgiving holiday. So I'm assuming it's not realistic to expect anything in any great detail or
Next week?
for the 12/3 meeting.
No.
Right,
No,
which
we're
is
not.
fine, which is fine. But that being the case then, I'm gonna punt to Anna. There were several questions that came up as far as chapter 111, and you referenced the subdivision. So you, Chuck will share the notes with you, and then you'll be prepared to be lead chair on December 3rd to discuss the issue of subdivision. Because we will also be resuming this conversation with the HDRB in attendance in the first part of the meeting to discuss some of their concerns. So, we have their memo, I would suggest you review it, we'll discuss it and be prepared to speak to that in the first part of our next meeting, and then we'll take up subdivision in the later half of our meeting, right? And that, Chuck, should give you ample time
Yeah.
to prepare for the next iteration for our December 17th meeting.
Yeah, like we've said, all along, our review is dependent on what we get from the applicant. So if the applicant can hit that, that timeframe and give us, enough time, to review, we're fine.
Okay. So that's the working plan as of now, which, as we've seen in the past, does have a tendency to slip.
It's a
But
big
at least,
project.
but at least that's what
Yeah.
we're shooting for, is December 17th.
Yep.
Okay, so that should be ample time. At this point, Anna, did you have anything you wanted to add in terms of the site subdivision issue?
No.
Okay. All right, that concludes, Mr. Galera, did you have anything that you wanted to add in terms of, you're pretty confident that your staff will be prepared to address the issues that were raised tonight for the 17th,
Yes,
next month?
I'll bring up one point.
Okay.
I'd like to say that we do not exceed the code in parking, okay? We're right at the code, okay? And I will tell you, I met with the county today, and they're very nervous about not even meeting code on their parking. And they cite the community center / senior center as a concern when there's an event there. So I just wanted to put that out there. I need to go back with some numbers to them, but I just wanted to address that, just to let you know.
Well, it's a good thing we're not looking for anything for another month then, huh?
Yes.
When you say that you do not exceed code, but you meet code, does that include the design provisions for subdivision plot development as laid out in chapter 111?
Yes.
But it doesn't seem to be the case when I look at the drawings.
Okay, we'll have Anna address that. You're prepared to address that next week in terms of the calculation,
On the
excuse
third.
me, on the 3rd, in terms of the calculation and the recommendation. What we need to do. Okay.
Wait, are you implying that the subdivision requirements of the code do not apply to the project?
That's not what I said.
Oh,
I simply said that Anna will have the notes of everything that was discussed tonight. She opened up with how she is reviewing it, and she'll be prepared to speak on it on December 3rd.
but it doesn't appear to be a legal issue to me. It appears to be a design issue.
Well, again, Chuck's notes, she's gonna bring up subdivision, Chuck will be here, and
Yeah.
then we'll be able to address it on the 3rd.
Yeah, we'll make sure I need the two jotted.
Because there's some discrepancy now, so it'll be reconciled on the 3rd when Anna brings up the subdivision issue. Right, that being the case, I don't believe that there is any new business other than what we did on the earlier part of the meeting. We have no other correspondence, so at this point, are there any members of the board that wish to make any comment regarding anything? Staff comments.
I would like to, this is the right time. I would like to, formally, place into the record correspondence, I prepared and submitted to the village dated October 14th, 2014 into the planning board's record.
Oh, okay, that's the letter regarding the timeline
Yeah,
for the project.
yes,
Okay.
yes, and I could read it into the record if the board would like me to. I can.
Do we have any objection in terms of, we want it read into the record? Anybody object?
I don't think it would be a bad idea, actually.
Anna, please.
Okay. Just wanna make a note first, that the letter is marked privileged and confidential. I did that. That was my discretion, to do that. However, the letter itself contains, and deals with and discusses matters of public record. So I just wanted to clarify that, up front. The letter is dated, October 14th, 2014, to Mayor Falloon and the Board of Trustees, with copy to Charles Voss of Barton and LaJudas, Chairman Malloy and members of the Planning Board, and Daniel Posen of my office, an attorney in my office. Dear Mayor Falloon and members of the Board of Trustees, the Board of Trustees has requested that we address questions that have arisen relating to the extent of the Planning Board's authority to be exercised during site plan review for the Butterfield redevelopment. Specifically, Trustee Hawkins believes there may have been some confusion by yet to be identified planning board members. Notably, there has been a great deal of misinformation about this issue, including a suggestion that any alleged misunderstanding or uncertainty by planning board members as to the extent of their authority during site plan review could put at risk or compromise the planning board's review as lead agency under the State Environmental Quality Review Act, SEQR, of the Butterfield redevelopment. In particular, there has been a suggestion by Trustee Hawkins that the so-called mass and scale of the Butterfield redevelopment was not considered during the SEQR review process. This represents a fundamental misunderstanding of SEQR requirements and of the SEQR review process that was diligently undertaken by the planning board. As discussed more fully below, the planning board complied with all substantive and procedural requisites of SEQR when it adopted its negative declaration of significance for the Butterfield redevelopment on February 19, 2014. The planning board's negative declaration remains a legally binding final determination that is also binding on all involved agencies, such as the Board of Trustees, and it has never been legally challenged. It also represents many months of very hard work by a volunteer board involving the review of environmental impacts for a project with procedural and technical complexities rarely encountered by a village like Cold Spring. Throughout this process, we advised the planning board of its lead agency duties and legal requirements under SEQR. As such, we have and will continue to protect the legal interests of the village with respect to its review of the Butterfield redevelopment and advise village boards we represent of all legal requirements that apply to their reviews and land use approvals. B4A zoning amendments background. Much of the history related to efforts by property owner Butterfield Realty to redevelop the Butterfield site preceded our representation of the village that commenced on August 2nd, 2013. The record reflects that the current Butterfield redevelopment proposal and concept plan resulted from the participation of village officials, residents, and consultants in a lengthy review process that considered various development schemes at numerous public meetings and a community charrette. On May 7th, 2013, proposed legislation was unanimously introduced by the Village Board of Trustees, Village Resolution 24-2013, that would create a new conditional B4A zoning district to change the zoning designation of the majority of the Butterfield site from zoning district B4 to zoning district B4A, and a small portion of the Butterfield site along Paulding Avenue from B4 to R1, and that required approval of a site plan that substantially conformed to the concept plan annexed to the proposed local law. At the same meeting, the Board of Trustees adopted a resolution declaring its intent to be lead agency under SEQR for a coordinated review with regard to the proposed B4A zoning amendments, and directed that notice be circulated to all involved and interested agencies. Shortly thereafter, on June 26, 2013, the Board of Trustees rescinded its resolution to be lead agency to allow the planning board to circulate its own notice of intent to be lead agency for the Butterfield redevelopment. On July 31st, 2013, Butterfield Realty assumed the designation of applicant with respect to the proposed B4A rezoning amendments and reviews associated with other village land use approvals, so that the village could be reimbursed by Butterfield Realty for the village's legal and other consultant costs associated with review of the Butterfield redevelopment project. Seek review by the planning board as lead agency. On August 2nd, 2013, our firm was engaged by the village to provide legal assistance and advice to the Board of Trustees, Planning Board, and to other village officers and boards, as well as to attend meetings as required by the village in connection with the Butterfield redevelopment. Subsequently, Planning Board Chairman Barney Malloy asked us to conduct a secret training session for planning board members on substantive and procedural requirements, and that training was conducted on the evening of August 7th, 2013. In September 2013, the Planning Board assumed the role of lead agency and commenced secret review of the Butterfield redevelopment, including review of Butterfield Realty's expanded environmental assessment form. After the Board of Trustees rescinded its resolution declaring its intent to be lead agency, and the Planning Board circulated its notice of intent to be lead agency to all involved and interested agencies, and receiving no objection thereto. At that time and throughout the secret review process, we advised the Planning Board of its lead agency duties and legal requirements under secret. We advised that a determination of significance, whether or not to issue a positive declaration or issue a negative declaration, must be initially made by the lead agency to require an environmental impact statement for a proposed action. The lead agency must determine that the action may include the potential for at least one significant adverse environmental impact, and determine that an EIS will not be required for the action. For an action, the lead agency must determine either that there will be no adverse environmental impacts, or that the identified adverse environmental impacts will not be significant. The Planning Board was also advised that in making its determination of significance, it must consider and review the EAF and any other information provided by the applicant, comments by involved and interested agencies and the public. It must thoroughly analyze the identified relevant areas of environmental concern to determine if the action may have a significant adverse impact on the environment, and set forth a reasoned elaboration of its determination in writing. As lead agency, the Planning Board was tasked with conducting a thorough review of potential environmental impacts associated with the Butterfield redevelopment as shown on the concept plan, and to base its secret determination of significance on the record of that review. Over a period of almost 6 months, the Planning Board conducted its review of the EAF and potential environmental impacts associated with the Butterfield redevelopment, and over that period, a significant secret record emerged, in large part due to the applicant's responses to questions raised by the Planning Board as lead agency. Again, we consistently advised the Planning Board members of their duties in accordance with the procedural and substantive requisites of the secret regulations, and Charles Voss of Barton & LaJudas, as planning consultant, assisted the board with all technical aspects of that review in accordance with those requirements. Potential community character impacts, potential visual impacts, and the mass and scale of the Butterfield redevelopment were reviewed throughout the secret review process, and the applicant was requested to provide additional information to enable thorough study of these potential impacts. In fact, the extensive amount of documentation reviewed and or produced by the lead agency during the secret review process, including the planning consultant's memos and the applicant's responses, the EAF, and in particular Part 3 of the EAF, the negative declaration, and the lead agency's comprehensive resolution accompanying the negative declaration, demonstrate the extent to which the lead agency thoroughly reviewed and considered all potential environmental impacts associated with the action. On February 19, 2014, the lead agency unanimously adopted a negative declaration determining that the action will have no significant adverse environmental impacts. This is a legally binding determination of the lead agency, supported by a secret record that demonstrates the Planning Board fully complied with the substantive and procedural requisites of secret. Further, if at that time there was any confusion whatsoever with regard to the Planning Board's site plan review authority, or when the scope of that authority would ultimately be determined, it was completely irrelevant to the lead agency determination of significance under SEQR. Planning board recommendations on proposed B4A zoning amendments and adoption of legislation by Board of Trustees. The planning board also had the opportunity to provide advisory comments to the Board of Trustees in accordance with Village Code 134-32 on the proposed B4A zoning amendments, including the concept plan. The planning board was advised that this would be an opportunity for the planning board to recommend changes to the proposed legislation and the concept plan. Of course, the Board of Trustees, as the legislative authority in the village, was not bound by such recommendations, but did duly consider same. After crafting a very detailed and thoughtful advisory memo over a number of meetings, the planning board thereafter, by majority 4-1 vote, approved the memo to the Board of Trustees that expressed their concerns with regard to the proposed B4A zoning amendments, including the concept plan and recommendations on how the planning board believed the amendments could be improved. The planning board acknowledged that its ability to modify aspects of the concept plan during site plan review was significantly constrained and restricted under the proposed B4A zoning amendments. And among its many other recommendations was that the adopted legislation give it greater ability to modify aspects of the concept plan during site plan review. The memo also recognized that the extent of the planning board's authority to modify the concept plan during site plan review would be dictated by the rezoning legislation in its final form to be adopted by the Board of Trustees. Thereafter, the Board of Trustees and Planning Board convened a joint meeting to discuss all recommendations set forth in the advisory memo. Over several subsequent meetings, the Board of Trustees discussed the proposed legislation, possible revisions to the legislation, and we prepared revised drafts of the legislation for the Board of Trustees to review and consider as directed. A public hearing was held on the revised B4A legislation on April 29, 2014. The proposed B4A zoning amendments, as last revised on April 30th, 2014, were adopted by the Board of Trustees by a 4-1 vote in favor on May 11, 2014. The resolution of approval that accompanied the legislation and was submitted to the Board of Trustees in draft form in advance of that meeting memorialized the procedures followed and confirmed that all legal requirements had been satisfied. The adopted B4A zoning amendments reflect some of the planning board's recommendations as set forth in the advisory memo. However, the Board of Trustees did not modify the concept plan that remains unchanged from when the proposed B4A zoning amendments were introduced as a proposed local law. The adopted B4A zoning amendments did not change in any way the main premise of B4A, that conditional zoning requires approval of a site plan that substantially conforms to a concept plan. Also, although the adopted legislation expressly authorizes the planning board in the case of unanticipated site conditions or aesthetic considerations to move buildings up to 25 feet in any direction and change building orientation by up to 15 degrees under such specific circumstances, it is our view that the adopted legislation imposes strict constraints on the planning board's ability to modify the concept plan during site plan review. September 17, 2014 Planning Board meeting. At the September 17, 2014 Planning Board meeting, during review of Butterfield Realty site plan submission, members asked for clarification regarding the planning board's authority to decrease the size of buildings shown on the site plan. We discussed the adopted B4A zoning amendments and explained our view that under that legislation, the planning board could not require the applicant to decrease the size of buildings as shown on the concept plan, although the applicant could voluntarily choose to reduce the size. There were questions posed about the extent of the planning board's authority to modify the concept plan during site plan review, and appeared that there was some confusion about the constraints imposed by the adopted B4A zoning amendments. At least one member felt that the planning board had authority to require a reduction in the size of buildings as shown on the concept plan, or to reduce the mass and scale of the concept plan during the site plan review process. There was a discussion about seeking clarification from the Board of Trustees on the intent of certain provisions of the adopted B4A zoning amendments. The planning board then requested advice of counsel on the legal issues presented. After the public portion of the meeting resumed, the planning board voted not to refer this question to the Board of Trustees, but instead, a majority voted to accept Butterfield Realty's site plan application as a formal submission, and the applicant was also directed to submit site plans to the HDRB. For purposes of clarification, it is our view, and the planning board was advised, that adopted B4A zoning amendments do not authorize the planning board to require a decrease in the size of buildings from what is shown on the concept plan, although the applicant itself can decrease the size of buildings on the proposed site plan, but is constrained not to increase building size. Although this interpretation may not be favored by some planning board members, we feel this is a reasonable interpretation of the adopted B4A zoning amendments, particularly given our role in drafting revisions to the proposed B4A zoning amendments, and also that conditional B4A zoning mandates approval of a site plan that substantially conforms to the concept plan. We have also consistently advised the planning board that they are not a legislative body and must apply legislation that is adopted by the Board of Trustees, although they may not agree with it. Again, the extent of the planning board's ability to make changes to the concept plan during site plan review and to specifically address mass and scale can only be determined by the final legislation adopted by the Board of Trustees. Please be assured that we have and will continue to advise the planning board to exercise their authority reasonably, in full compliance with the law, and with an understanding of what those requirements are. The technical standards and legal complexities and other intricacies associated with review of a project like the Butterfield redevelopment are substantial, particularly here when the village is not accustomed to reviewing such projects. Under such circumstances, it is not at all unusual that misunderstandings could occur. We would also like to assure the Board of Trustees and Planning Board, and also on behalf of planning consultants Barton and LaJudas, that we have endeavored to provide the best possible legal and technical advice that protects the village and is in the village's best interest. And thank you for this opportunity to provide the necessary clarification with regard to this matter. Signed, Anna Giorgio.
Thank you. And that, part of the record, do any members of the planning board wish to comment?
Oh, yes.
Okay, one at a time. Karen?
I'm happy to go first because it was, my question saying I was confused about when we could address, in a meaningful way, I think is the best way to put it, the mass and scale. We knew during seeker, and I have to say Anna was extremely good in telling us what we had to do during seeker, giving us literature about what we had to do in seeker. But mass and scale was always one of the things that we were concerned about. We have to go back though, as Anna said in her letter, and go back and see what the concept plan was. We had nothing to do with the concept plan. What B4A, which is tethered to the concept plan, how the draft was written, and planning boards don't work in a void. We had to take all those things into consideration. I will say that B4A draft was extremely well tightened up, I guess. Actually, I went back and I read over a year's worth of minutes. And when I was a little tired of reading, I'd look at videos too. In, I believe it was April of 2003, in one of the village board meetings, then trustee Francisco.
Excuse me, 2013.
There's a 3, did I say 13?
Yeah, some memory.
Yeah, right.
I'm
Matt
sorry, go ahead.
Francisco is, the minutes reflect that he questioned whether or not there was sufficient detail about the substantial conformity. And I believe he did it thinking that it would be very good for the village to make sure that an applicant didn't play fast and loose. In 2014, he had an open hours, open session, I don't know what it was, on a Saturday, it was sometime before the election. And he brought up Butterfield and said that he had tightened this up, along with the help of Steve Gaba and I don't know who else. They tightened it up, and he did say that he felt that it might have been, ended up being a little tight, and there might be unintended consequences to it. I think that's where we are now, at one of those unintended consequences. I would like to say that I don't feel that we were misled or misguided by either of the firms that were hired to help us. And I would also say that by asking some of these questions, we are doing our job. We're trying to get the very best thing that we can out of this for the village. I am very sorry that things kind of spun out of control. I think it's a shame that residents in Cold Spring resorted to some name calling, that there were things published that were untrue, and I think we need to put all of that behind us, and we have to get going to make this project the best we possibly can. And that's not just the planning board, it's everybody who has to, at one point, get behind this. And I think Cold Spring and Butterfield Realty has a great opportunity to have a good project, and I think we've got to focus on that. Thank you.
Here.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get to public comment. Arnie?
Although I agree with most aspects of the project, I have thought for a long time that the mass and scale was inappropriate both for the site and for Cold Spring as a whole. However, in light of what the legal counsel has advised us, my personal opinions are not appropriate, or I shouldn't say appropriate, are not, I guess, germane to the fact. I still think the project is, the mass and scale of the project is inappropriate for the site and for the village. And as I pointed out several times before, you can take almost the entire senior complex on the other side of the road and stick it inside one of the buildings, in one of the building stuff. That's how massive these buildings are. In addition to that, I was the one who voted against sending our comments to the village board. And the reason I voted against it was because I thought that our comments were not strong enough. All we wanted to do was tell the village board that we had a concern about mass and scale. I wanted to do more. I wanted to tell the village board, or give them some recommendations for consideration. For instance, the existing code for senior housing specifies maximum size of buildings, it specifies minimum distance between buildings, and yet our recommendations didn't include any of that information. And therefore, I felt that we were doing a disservice to the village by not being stronger in our recommendations. But in light of what our legal counsel has advised us, you know, I will follow the B4A. I have no other choice.
I actually was hoping for comments because I had written something, because I wanted to read it. All right. Okay. First, I would like to state that Mr. Robson was correct when he said that I am not an enemy of the Butterfield project. And at this point, I would hope that nobody is. I would hope that everyone involved is working towards the same goal and a project that would be a very visible asset to our community. Mr. Valero wants the people to be pleased with his project, the board members want to be pleased with the project, and the village residents want to be pleased with the project. But as of now, what we have is a lot of public meetings, passionate debates regarding this property, and all that's left is an abandoned building to the gateway of our village that's just getting more and more derelict looking. So with that, I came to the planning board without an agenda on this or any other project, and to review each proposed guided by two things, common sense and municipal law. And this is what needs clarification. The B4 zoning change has limited the planning board's authority to amend the project. Before it was signed into law, the members of the planning board sent 4 pages of recommendations to the recommendation letter to the village board asking for revisions. These recommendations were based on a concept plan that had already been in existence for a number of years and was shown to the town and the public. With our consultations with Chuck Voss and Anna Giorgio about B4A, there weren't any discussions about being misled by anyone, but about the village board's limitations when they adopted the law. If the members of the planning board appeared confused that they did not have proper authority over the size and scale of the buildings during site review, it was because the authority was not extended to them by the new B4A. It is apparent that most of our recommendations were not implemented in the final draft, and in our discussion with Ms. Giorgio, we went through the wording of the law that the village board handed down. The authority of the planning board can only be applied in certain areas, and this is the law we must work with, along with any other boards that deal with the B4A zoning. My main concern is not that members of the planning board were misled by anyone, but that limitations were imposed on us when the zoning change was authored and voted on. Okay? Thank you.
Any other, oh, why not?
I have to say, I have a great respect for the eloquent comments of my fellow board members, and I'm not going to try to repeat or expand. I simply emphasize that when we had the opportunity to make suggestions to the village board, to the legislative body, our leading point was our concern about the mass of the buildings in this project. And even though that was our main concern, the village board chose to do nothing and make no further changes in the B4A. And that, as others have said, is now the law under which we are working and which we must work. So they are the legislative body, and it needs to be recognized that we all have different roles, and we respect their role, and we'll go forward accordingly.
Thank you. Chuck, did you have anything you wanted to say?
No, I just appreciate, certainly the feedback from the board. I know it's been, somewhat difficult to kind of be in the eye of the storm as, the consultants. And as Anna mentioned in the letter, the whole purpose for the letter was to basically respond to, the question that the mayor and the trustees asked, were there any issues that, were as a result of, bad advice or poor advice, and Anna and I agree, we don't think so. We were hired to do a job for the village. We felt we did that job very thoroughly, and very completely. What else can you say? I mean, it was, it's our job to basically help you guys through this process. It's a difficult process. It's a large process. I know the mayor and I spoke about 2 weeks ago, and he reiterated exactly what, you four had said. He had spoken to every one of you a couple weeks ago and basically, told me the same, that, neither one of you had any issues, in terms of felt like you were being misled or anything. So, it seems like it's a non-issue at this point, and, I think we agree. We're ready to kind of proceed with the site plan review process, so.
Thank you. The only point I'll add, because I don't think I can add anything to what was said tonight, is I will remind everybody going forward that we are the planning board and we are in site plan review. Now, what that means is site plan review is exactly that, is that we are here, what you heard tonight for almost 2 hours, is to review the technical components of the plan as proposed, right? To see that the engineering, that everything proves out, that what has been proposed, what has been submitted, can be built within the existing code, which now is B4A for this site. We will continue to do the site plan review. We will continue to prove out what needs to be done to make sure that it complies with the adopted village zone for this particular parcel, and that's what the planning board will do, because that is our role. So, everyone is welcome to attend, observe, listen. As Chuck has indicated, we'll be at this probably for another couple of months, but hopefully, and at the end of that process, we will have a product and a project that if there are some people who don't agree with it, at least they will have the opportunity to realize how we got there, where we are, the genesis of it, how it started, who's responsible for what, and ultimately where it ends up. And as I do for almost every meeting, for those of you who are new to this, is all the documentation, everything that was discussed and reviewed tonight is available on the village website on the planning board page. Because all correspondence, all documentation, we put up and we make available, so you can review it at your leisure. As soon as this technical memo that we reviewed tonight, that will be posted as well as Chuck's reply and answers after his meeting with the applicants tomorrow. It will be posted in a reasonable amount of time. And then we will continue with the review on December 17th. Our December 3rd meeting will pertain to subdivision issues, as well as a joint meeting with the HDRB to address or at least hear what some of their concerns are relative to their review of the project. So that's where we are tonight. That's where we will probably be for the next 2 to 5 meetings. And at this point in time, I will now open it up to public comment. However, again, as is our tradition here, public comment means precisely that. You may comment about anything that was on the agenda, anything that was discussed by the board or by staff here tonight, right? It is not a Q&A, it is not an interrogation, all right? I mean, hopefully I have made that clear. Obviously, from what I've heard and what people have stopped me on the street, they understand it, and that's how we will proceed. You're welcome to comment about anything that you heard here tonight or anything that was an agenda item, right? And at the close of public comment, the meeting will be adjourned. With that being said, I would ask that you wait to be called on, you identify yourself for the record, and we will begin. Is there any public comment? You are?
Barbara Scuchamara, County Legislator. I just want to commend the board. I mean, this is a huge project. And I can't even imagine the amount of hours that you've all put into this. I'm very excited tonight, as Paul touched on. We met county executive, deputy county executive, Bruce Walker, and Paul and myself, to look at the plans and start ironing out some details of the lease agreement and looking at the prospective floor plans. And I am thrilled to see the county moving forward. We have money in the budget for next year, and I'm very excited about this. Also, we'll be engaging the ALES in the next few weeks to look at the floor plans and have the architects scope out, right, Paul, that's what we were doing, scope out what it's gonna look like and what we're gonna put in it. So that's very exciting, and I know there's quite a few people in the audience that are excited about that too. And as Paul touched on, we were a little concerned about the parking, because I feel if we build it, they will come. And we're gonna have a big population of seniors take advantage of this center. Transportation, the trolley, bringing the seniors to the center is, really an important thing, so keep that in mind. Thank you again.
Any additional public comment?
Matt, Francisco, with respect to Karen's comments about the B4A and kind of her understanding of what my comments were, the B4A was, the original one came out of comments from public feedback, as well as over time, that the the villagers were not at all comfortable moving forward without assurances of what would be built. It was more than 83% of the comment was to that effect at the first public hearing. So the second B4A that was drafted did attempt to tighten up substantial conformity that was done in concert with the existing planning board at the time. And it also tightened up the uses of each building, so then the villagers would have some concern that their concerns would be addressed, that what was actually promised would actually be built. And in my comments to both the village board as well as the planning board, I said, but this is a double-edged sword. You know, while it won't get any worse, it'll make it difficult to make it any better, right? And it was a way to move forward, and I discussed that in meetings with Paul as well as the village board, and it was a way to move forward. And what could have happened, but what did not happen, was that you brought your comments to the village board. I'm not on that board any longer. You brought them on April 10th. Your first item was massive scale. That board chose not to take your comments and not to reduce the scale. They could have done so, they did not do so.
Any additional public comment?
I have public comment. I'm Stephanie Hawkins, I'm on the Board of Trustees, and I just want to address a statement in Anna's letter, which mistakenly attributes...
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Could you speak up a little bit?
Yeah, I wanted to address Anna's letter. There's a statement in the letter that is inaccurately attributes to me, a statement that I have said that mass and scale was not considered during seeker process, and that's actually not the case. The questions I brought to you and to my colleagues on the village board were reflective of what I heard you discuss and what was expressed here on September 17th. I heard Karn say that, and I heard you say, Arnie, that your concerns about your questions and interest in addressing the mass and scale of the development was advised, that you were advised to wait and put that off until site plan review, and that the frustration and surprise you expressed on the 17th was because of that. So the statements that are attributed to me in that letter are not mine.
Any additional public comment?
And I'm still
Sorry.
interested to understand how you were able to issue a negative deck on a project that had an environmental impact that tonight you say that now you have concerns about, and that you had them throughout the seeker review. And the law is that if there is at least one environmental impact that cannot be mitigated, the negative deck cannot be issued, and it should be a pause deck. And I know that everyone in this room has been anticipating this project. I have, and quite frankly, until the 17th, I believed that the planning board was on the same page with the developer and was fully aware of the law that the village had adopted, because I agree with Steve Barshoff that yes, a neg deck was issued, and yes, the village board did adopt a B4A zone. I voted against it, but I accept democracy, contrary to what Mr. Barshoff would have you believe. And my concern arises when you have questions, and I think it's very important for the community to understand that when the planning board members have, even if as individuals, when planning board members have concerns about development, the whole community should have concerns and be ready to give ear to those concerns and support those concerns in whatever direction they go in. And I think the fact that Steve Barshoff and Paul Galaro are here tonight, and there is a huge staff here tonight, I think demonstrates a very real concern on their part about this question of misunderstanding, because the stakes are very high, and not just for the community with this development, but also for the developer. This man has invested time and money, and this kind of project is not for the faint of heart, and he certainly isn't. But I think that shows us, it indicates to us that there is reason to be concerned and to focus on this. I appreciate very much the time each of the four of you to prepare your statements. I do. Thank you.
Is there any additional public comment? Identify.
Yeah, my name is John Cronin. I live at 64 Paulding Avenue, directly across the street from the proposed Butterfield development. First of all, in my 40-year environmental career, I've been to a lot of meetings like this, and I have to say that the village and the planning board has really distinguished itself. Just listening tonight, the level of detail you're willing to consider and have patience with and go over is very impressive. I've been to many town and village board meetings in my career, including when I worked for Congressman Fish and Assemblyman Henchy, more hours than I would like to admit. But this is a rare performance by a planning board. So my compliments to you all and all the time you've put into this. Because of my background, it's very easy to cast me as anti-development, which I've probably earned that many times over my career. You think? Okay, all right. No comments from the
All right, let's.
legal gallery. But there is a place for development, and I've developed a very strong philosophy about it, and it's not often discussed. For development to be successful for a community, yes, it should be aesthetic, yes, it should be compatible. I think that this development makes that match. Chestnut Street, we tend to look at Chestnut Street through rose-colored glasses. It's at least 70% ugly. I mean, this is not an attractive place. We've got a beautiful church and some lovely houses, but we've got maybe 1,000 feet of asphalt, maybe 2 acres of it. We've got gas stations, mini malls, haphazard commercial development, a falling down hospital that looks like a factory, an historic building that's falling down. I mean, we haven't done a good job on Chestnut Street. My feeling is that this development after the church may end up being one of the most attractive things on Chestnut Street. But that's not enough. I think there's a hidden thing that a village like Cold Spring has to be concerned about. A development like this has to be a successful business for a lot of reasons. One is that the future of a development like this depends on the profit margin of how a development like this is run. I've learned this the hard way over the years. There are a lot of developments that have gotten approved. You can go back, I could go back and look at them now, that are falling down, that are not kept up, where the O&M is not being done, for the simple reason that the developer got by on the cheap, and maybe got by on the cheap by trying to meet some restrictions of the village, and either develop it or you don't develop it. But we do have to keep in mind that if we are going to go along with development at all, we have to have the welfare of the person investing in that development in mind as well, because that also goes to the future of our community and what this is going to look like in 5 years, 10 years, and 15 years. Mass and scale is a very difficult thing to wrestle with in that regard. But I do encourage you as well, to anybody who looks at this, to keep in mind that it is in our interest for this to be a successful investment by the person who's doing the development. And that's for the good of our community. So it's an issue that's not often raised. Mr. Galaro might be too modest to raise it on his own. But I think it's a very important one. And again, it's a lesson I've learned the hard way. And the last thing I'll say is that I've made it my business to go down and look at the waterfront development inside and out and to talk to some of the residents. And it has given me faith over the last year or so that the future of this development, in fact, could be a very good one if it's economically viable for the owner and if it meets the same aesthetics as what went on down at that waterfront. I'd be very proud to live across the street from it.
Any additional public comment?
Also want to echo the thanks to the planning board. I sat through those long meetings when the resolutions were drafted, when the comments to the village board were prepared. I remember the planning board going over those comments line by line by line by line. Every single line was debated and discussed, and there was certainly open discussion, and I remember Arnie's points that he made where he was not in sync with the other members of the board. The reason I bring it up is because, look, no applicant and planning board ever see completely eye to eye on everything. But one thing that we do see eye to eye on is that this board has proceeded professionally, has proceeded diligently, has put in a tremendous amount of work. I think the project is going to be better for it. I think that you are requiring the applicant to think things through. Changes have been made, will continue to be made to make sure that the project is well designed. And I know that the consultants work very well together, the technical consultants, to address these things, again, all with the same goal in mind of creating exactly, John, what you're looking for, which is a well-designed, well-conceived project that will be economically viable and the village can be proud of for many, many, many years in the future. I think that the process always has bumps in the road. I can tell you from my 30 years of experience that it is very rare, extremely rare, to hear the kind of presentation that was made by individual planning board members tonight to discuss an issue that had realized some significant notoriety in the community, to put it mildly, and to address it in a clear and forthright way. Regardless of what the positions are that you took, that is something in and of itself that is commendable and is appreciated. Hopefully it puts this matter to rest so that we can go, as you said, Barney, and proceed with site plan, subdivision review, and bring this project to fruition. Thank you very much.
Is there any additional public comment?
Yes, Phil Heffernan, 9 Church Street. I concur with much of what's been said. And I just wanted to mention one thing, which was we have a great working relationship with Paul Galero. He came to this village and picked up where another developer left off, or left, period. And through a process, and I just want to remind the community of this history that we have, through a process of give and take, issues of mass and scale were talked about and resolved to a fairly significant degree. And what's wonderful is that everyone, I think, I'm not going to speak for everyone, but most people that I know in this community are in love with that development. So when I became aware that there was this kind of big hiccup here, I guess one place I went was, you know, we don't always have to press for our maximum advantage. We can operate as people that live in a community and will live with the results of our work in this community for a century. For some of us, who are like maybe 1 right now. And I do have this sense, as John pointed out, of trust that that kind of dialogue might still go on. And that ears are open and hearts are open, and it, you know, I can't speak for his bottom line, obviously, I have no idea. But I can speak for historical precedent. And I just would like to think, call me naive, that that might take place in this situation. Thank you.
Any additional public comment? Oh, sorry, right there.
Donna?
Yeah.
Hi. Donna Anderson, Senior Advocate. Recently, there have been a lot of backpedaling on issues passed by the various boards. The B4A zoning amendment, the CEQA review, and the negative declaration. Many hours of detailed information was sifted through, and at the end of all, was passed by a majority of the boards. It's been done legally, and now some have come forward and want to change their decision. It's like a marriage and then a divorce. I'm sure the village knows the challenges ahead if this is done. Please stop the backpedaling. Everything has been done in full compliance with the law. The county has put aside money in their budget for the Butterfield project, so let's get it moving. Thank you.
Any additional public comment? Sorry. Please.
Hi, I'm Shirley Norton. I live in the Chestnut Ridge Apartments. And, I've been following all of this for about 2.5 years. I've been here almost 3 years now. And felt, there was a lot of negative stuff going on that was I felt very insulted and disrespected by, and not cared for, and not, felt unsupported as a senior and as a member of this community. So whatever negative stuff was happening or said, whoever was saying that, I don't trust that, whatever's negative about all of this. I'm not gonna be specific, cause, I might put a letter in the paper about being specific, but I'm not gonna list it tonight. Because it's probably not pertaining to what your meeting was tonight, but.
Thank you.
And I have a list of the positive things too, but, my basic thing I wanna say is that I really trust the word trust. You mentioned the word trust, and that's my bottom line, is that with all of you wonderful officials and leaders and citizens of this community, I trust the people who are positive and who support seniors and support the Butterfield project, because I've been looking at it for 2 years or so and dreaming. I live across the street from there, so I just imagine this wonderful project. So I want to thank the planning board members. I want to thank Barbara Scuchamara. I want to thank Paul Galero and Steve Baratoff. I listened to you. I wasn't at the meeting Tuesday night or Monday night, but I listened to what you said. And Anna and Chuck, all these wonderful characters that I have. All of you, Barney, I just really think as a senior and wanting to be cared about and heard, the people who listen to us, who talk to us, at the county level, they came to our town to talk to us about this. They listened to us, they put aside $64,000 for this, to have their offices here, which would include the senior community center, and the office for senior resources, and whatever, the post office. I just thank you all that were positive for us, but also for the community and the county. If I forgot, I had a list, but I don't see if I forgot anybody. Because Barney, you've gotten a lot of flack, and a lot of people get criticized and put down, and I just really appreciate you. I really do, and I appreciate what you're gonna do now, because I think we're going on, and we're gonna stop being negative and.
I'll call my mother and let her know.
You can tell her it's okay. Because, the seniors, and we have people that support this, we support this. And I know you're having trouble with the mass and scale and all that stuff, but I trust you're gonna work it out. I believe in you because you've listened to us, you provided our suggestions, you provided money, you provided the buildings. Paul Galero listened to us, he's attentive to what we suggested. Barney, you've been so listening to what we suggested, you care about us. That's the bottom line for me and for the community and the county, that you care about us and you're working really hard. hard to provide what is needed, and I believe, you know, you're intelligent, you're caring, I'm for you.
Don't let it go to your head.
Again, I'll call my mother.
Yeah, I'm sorry, one quick amendment, all
I'll
right?
call your mother.
I have to amend my comments. I neglected to mention that I am a senior. I'll be 65 in July. I'm a senior in good standing.
There you go.
Okay.
You have to join the club. Join the club.
Phil neglected to mention he's a senior. But no, I do want to mention that because I'm very excited about that element of the development, and I don't plan on leaving Cold Spring, so.
Is there any additional public comment?
Michael Robinson, I just want to echo what Stephanie said. I do very much thank the 4 planning board members that made comments tonight for their much needed clarification. I appreciate it.
Anything else?
Frank Haggerty, notwithstanding many of the comments made today, perhaps in contradiction with some of them, I will mention that I did attend many of your board meetings in the dead of winter. I think it was about a year ago, or a little less than a year ago. And I believe that was before the B4A amendment passed. And I do recall suggestions or information being relayed that certain processes, and I believe it was review-related processes, would be occurring not as part of the SEQR review, but actually after that in a so-called site review. And maybe that's true, and maybe you're in agreement with that, and maybe that's what you're doing, or planning to do now. But I was under the impression that I believe I heard, and again, I attended, some sparsely attended, very cold meetings, and I do recall, or I believe I do recall that it was mentioned that mass and scale would be something that would be brought up. But maybe that maybe that can be explained in other ways. But I remember that was going to be discussed in site plan review after or not during the seeker.
Any additional public comment? That being the case, it is now 9:25. May I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
Yes.
Show that character Karen Dunn. Do I have a second?
I second.
Second by Jim Pergamo. It is 9:25. Thank you all. Again, we'll be doing this again on 12/3. We'll be doing 2 shows monthly.
Too much sitting for me.
Good, how are you doing?
Good to see
Well, I'm at the planning board meeting, so I mentioned
I know.